So I'm changing my plans a little bit because I'm going to study for doing Turing tests because you can retry the tests every 3 months, and I want to be able to do them now. In case I fail, I have another chance by the end of the year to get them right. And the test that I'm talking about is from this site here. You can do a bunch of tests and then they help you get hired. So my plan for now at least is to do all of these tests here. And I'm going to study because I did them a while ago and I wrote down a bunch, I took a bunch of notes after I did it in order to study. So I think I'm going to study those things now and then take the tests. And then I have these ones which I'm going to take just to take some notes. Some of them I know some stuff, but I'm not sure if I know enough to pass the tests. So I know a little bit of Rust and TypeScript and Golang and Socket.io, but not sure if it's enough. And a little bit about Spark, but not Spark, definitely not enough to pass. But I'm still gonna take the test. And the other ones, I think, except Redis, which I don't know a lot, but I know some things. It's not that complicated. I think I can pass these ones, but we'll see. And then in case I don't pass, I can just retake them 3 months from now. And I think it's a good way to study because they're obviously asking for things that matter in practice. And maybe I'll do Node.js as well. Sure, forgot, but yeah. And then after I finish doing all these tests and studying and taking notes, then I'm gonna go back to focusing on getting the data from the blockchain. So I think I'm gonna study Django and then Next, and then I'm gonna cut the stream and do the tests.
So when I was starting out learning how to code in Django, I found using URLs to be rather frustrating. Like, it didn't always work exactly the way I wanted, and if I missed one little piece, the URL would just be completely broken. And then when I would try to reverse that URL, it was madness. So in this one, we're going to actually discuss how URL or regular expressions work in Django. Now, the important thing here is to understand that regular expressions are used in all kinds of programming. It's not just in Python, it's certainly not just in Django URLs. But what they allow us to do is to pick out pieces of text and to verify what those pieces are prior to ever touching anything else. So in our case, we verify that, let's say for instance, you're passing an ID to get a blog post. You want a specific ID or a specific year or a specific slug. We want to make sure that those things or that format is already there before it moves on to the next step. This becomes more clear when you see it in action, but the main thing here is what a regular expression can do is it can validate our URL prior to doing anything else, which is really cool, and it actually saves us a lot of time in the backend and a lot of time for our users. So if the URL that they're asking for isn't matched, just a 404 comes up, a page not found comes up, and that's something that's really cool. Now, like many of these days, we're going to be working off of a blog post, which is right here, and that blog post will actually show you all this stuff. So that's going to be the latest and greatest version of this based on the questions that we might get from you. So go ahead and open that up right now, and at the same time, let's go ahead and jump into the code and talk about it. Now, into the post, of course, I'm going to assume a few things. You have some Django experience, like try Django 1.11, and you are on this guide. But the main thing here is understanding that we're only covering a little bit about Django. This is more about regular expressions and just some of the basics as they relate to pattern matching in any given URL. So we're going to actually open up Python and just go through a lot of these things. And I'm just going to copy and paste all this stuff because we don't really need to retype it, do we? So I'm in a Django project, and I have a virtual environment activated, and I'm just going into my Django shell. That's not necessary. You can go into just a Python shell, and even in an older version of Python. But as we see from here, I'm using 3.6.4, and I believe I have Django version 2 something 2 and up. I mean, it might be 0.0.3, but that's not that important. Okay, so what a regular expression is it's a string or a regular expression pattern that we compare against another string or another Python string. And that's it. I mean, you can do all sorts of things with this. You can do replacement. You can do extraction, so like actually grabbing things out of the string. And that's actually what the URLs do, or the URL patterns do. So let's go ahead and grab some of these things right here. I'm going to go ahead and copy this first few lines and bring it in. We've got our matching digits regular expression, also known as regex. So regex, you'll see that a lot of times, or regex, right? So importing RE is the regular expressions module that's built into Python, and these are common URL paths you may or may not see. Now, intuitively, looking at this right here, which of these 4 paths actually match this regular expression? What's your intuition with that? It might be a little bit challenging, but this right here shows us that it's digits only. So that piece is the key part. This part right here actually names what matches in here, right? So it actually names 1, 2, 3, 4 as the keyword argument of ID. So to get this ID, we can actually use this method that I created here to grab it for us. Now, this is a very simple method that essentially takes in a string, like one of these, and then it compiles a regular expression, that's what this does, and then it searches in that regular expression for the group, also known as that keyword, which we call ID, of ID, right? And that actually grabs it for us. So if we get ID of any of these paths, like block path 1, and then go so on and so forth, we see that that ID is 1. Now, as it relates to Django, this is obviously very important because then we can do stuff like post.objects.get ID equals to 1, and that is a query on our backend, right? Granted, I don't have post in here just yet, but what we can also do is that same thing, but for 2, and now we have the ID of 2. Again, grabbing what that ID is shows us that what we would end up querying in our backend is this right here. But what this should also show us is how it validates things prior to even doing one of these queries. Now, how does it do that? Well, it does it based off of what our parameters are in this regular expression. So going back to that get ID method, if I did get ID of that blog path 4, I'm actually going to write it out. I'll write out blog/winter is coming for you Game of Thrones fans, and I press enter here. What is going to happen? What is it going to give me back? I hit enter. It says none type. So this is in a way a validation error showing me that this doesn't have an ID. So this is where Django can say, hey, let's raise an HTTP 404, a page not found. Let's do that instead of even coming close to the object. Instead of doing something like post.objects.get and assuming that it somehow set the ID of equaling to winter is coming, it won't even get to that point, right? It already didn't validate up here with that regular expression. And that alone is it. I mean, if you just understand that piece, knowing that whatever's in that regular expression turns into the keyword argument, so this right here turns into the keyword argument that's passed to your view, I'll get to that in a second, and you know that whatever's in here is validated against the path. If you know just those two things, you probably have a really good understanding of how regular expressions work, and you can go into our common regular expressions guide for Django URLs located right there, and that will actually show you a lot of these different regular expressions you may see in any given URL, such as username, slug, and so on. Now back into ours, we want to go a little bit further and improve how we get these items, right? So we can put that last one, the winter is coming one, we can put that into a try block, and in that way it gives me something like this. It does not have a matching ID. It's not raising an attribute error like it did. It's just saying, hey, we don't have anything that matches this, and boom, done. Now again, that's a way of handling that error. Now this has nothing to do with Django, but it does show us that those URLs are really clever because they use regular expressions, and that's also why I recommend most people just use regular expressions, even though Django has a few new features out that you can check out that don't require you to use regular expressions. So your question might be, now how do I handle this one then? How do I get the slug, otherwise known as this piece right here? How do I extract that? Well, that regular expression is just slightly different. Notice instead of using the digits, it's using characters. So it's using characters and a dash. That's what that's for. And we're able to get everything that's a character and a dash, and it goes in there. And then that regular expression works. So if we do this one, I can bring it in here, and I will be able to print out the slug for each one, or what I'm calling is the slug. It doesn't have to be called that, but we see that now it's treating this whole block as the keyword argument of slug, and that's coming in as, one is one of the keyword arguments, as so as the winter is coming slug. So it actually matches both of those things. It's allowing us to get the digits as well as the slugs, which is really cool because that means then our our views can actually handle how those two things are done. So you can keep going through this and understanding that there's various ways on how you can extract different pieces of a URL, right? So like here, there's 2 slugs, and we can actually pull out those 2 slugs based off of the names that we're giving to them, right? So I give it a group name of slug2 and a group name of just slug, and then I just do a quick little search, grab that group, and it pulls those things out. You can mix IDs with slugs, as we see here. That's an ID that only takes in digits, and then this one uses digits and characters, so you can grab both of those things. You can also just go ahead and mix argument names, right? So like right here, we've got a username. This has other attributes that the slug doesn't. It has a period in there. It has an @ sign and a plus sign. So those are different ways on how you might be able to grab the username. So this would be good for also emails. You could use this to actually get somebody's email in a username. Not that I recommend doing that, but using that @ sign, having the period, that will allow for those things to happen. Much like we see in this path right here, Jon.Snow is the Night King is here. That does not sound like a good blog post for Jon Snow. But the cool thing here is that these keyword arguments are related to how the regular expression is set up, but they aren't required. Like you don't actually have to name it anything here. You don't have to give it a name. You can omit that completely, and it will still match the regular expression. But when it comes to Django URLs, you definitely want to have a named keyword in there. So named keyword is in the name expression. So when we go down through URLing, it's not a whole lot different than this. Like you see all these things here. There's a path, and then the various view that's going to handle whatever that URL is, right? So what Django does in the URLs, if you look at those URLs, what it does is it takes whatever that regular expression is, and whatever path is being sent to it, and then it sends that to its corresponding view, right? Or if you're using a function-based view, it would be like detail view, and it takes in a request, and then your keyword argument. So in this case, it would be ID. In some cases, it might be slug or PK, and so on. Right? So you actually pass those things in because by default, that's what's happening here. Okay. So the next part of this is actually seeing it in action. Now, if you're from older versions of Django, you'll know that Django used to use just this URL parameter or the URL method to actually design these URLs. That's changed to being RE path or regular expression path versus the simple version called path, the one that comes in by default. We already use the regular expression path as you see here. And this code is coming directly from here, but I already have views and whatnot already set up to handle those things. The view itself and the template itself don't actually matter, but you do want to make sure that you have them on here. So what I want to do is jump into my project and go to one of these places. So if I go into my blog and hit enter, I see I got a template design. That's a good sign. The next thing is I'm going to go to an ID. Let's say blog post of with ID of 1, and I hit enter. What I get right here is this attribute error. Hey, wait a minute, I've seen an attribute error before. Let's look back into the shell and scroll up a little bit. That attribute error came right here. None type object does not have attribute group. Attribute error. That means that I have something wrong with my regular expression as it relates to the view. So what is the thing that's wrong? I have a name as ID. This is looking for PK or slug. Now why is it looking for those things? Well, that's because it's a built-in Django detail view. It's a generic view to actually handle that URL by default. So by default, Django is looking for, I'll keep these comments down, either PK as a digit, right? Or it's looking for slug as some sort of slug field, like this, as we've seen on our blog post. So that's what it's looking for by default. So what we need to do is accept the fact that we wanted to change what our keyword argument was, what our regular expression keyword argument was that's going to this view. I want to change it. I don't want to go with the default. And you can, there's nothing wrong with that, but I want to show you how it's done. And there's 2 ways. I'll show you how to do it in class-based view, which is what I'm about to do, and I'll also show you how to do it in a function-based view, and even though I already kind of showed you how to do it anyway. So what I'm going to do is in here is override the method get object, takes in self args and keyword args, and it's going to return post.objects.get of some kind. Now, I don't usually want to do something like this. You don't want to do this because if you do an ID of something that does not exist, it raises some sort of error. So to augment that or to circumvent that, we are going to do get object or 44. This is a nice little convenient method to just say get object or 44 of the post, and then whatever parameter we're going to be passing it. Now, by default, it's the primary key, right? Or it's the slug field. It's looking for one of those 2 things. Now, slug field might not actually exist on your model. It might not. PK definitely does because that is built in by default to every Django model. But then again, so is ID. Well, in fact, you may know this. You may not. ID equals to PK. Those are the same field. It's just Django isn't treating them the same in this case because you can actually change what primary key is when that's what PK stands for. Now, the question should be is how do I actually get to the past ID? How do I get the URL ID? Right? How do I grab that? Well, it's actually really simple in class view. You just do URL. Let's do URL ID equals to self.get, rather not get, but self.keyword args.get ID. Now, this is the named regular expression ID. Okay, go back here. There's that named ID, named regular expression. That's it right here. Contrast that with a function-based view, and it's not a whole lot different. But function-based views don't have built-in things to them, so you have to write all of them out. Now, a regular function-based view, let's say it's a list view. We'll do list view first. We'll change the name of it in just a second. It's going to be something like that. Let's call this list view, and it's going to return render, and it's going to take in the request, your template, and your context. I'm not going to actually implement this view, but that's what it does. The detail view can actually look the same, much like above, right? Those the 2 classes views aren't a whole lot different. Here's the detail view. But the biggest difference with this detail view is that it can actually pass in an argument here. It can pass in the URL's keyword argument or arguments, however many you have. You can actually pass those in to your function-based view here as the actual name itself. So in this case, it's ID. Again, by default, it would be primary key, but we're going off of ID. And of course, if you want multiple, like slug and username, let's say for instance you had multiple or you didn't have multiple, but you wanted to be prepared in the future for multiple, that's how you do it in a function-based view and a class-based view. Not a whole lot different. You would just say URL slug equals to the slug, URL username equals to the username. Okay, so that is it. We actually don't have a whole lot more to talk about with this, other than maybe the questions you may have. So if you have some, please let us know in the comments. I will want to challenge you with something: is how
A lot of this stuff I've already seen because I worked on the project, and I watched a lot of videos, studied a lot in order to be able to do the things. But some of the stuff I didn't use, and I think it will be interesting to learn more about it. Usually I just watch two videos when I have a lot of information, and then sometimes read an article or something like that.
Hi, welcome to Knowledge.com. So today we are going to discuss about regular expression in Python. So before getting into what is this regular expression and what exactly we are going to do, I just want to explain what the requirement is all about for this video. So the requirement is, so I have a paragraph. In the paragraph I have a list of URLs comes in between. Okay, so I have to extract only the URL from the file. Okay, so now I just show you the solution. The solution would be decided to use this regular expression, which is I. Regular expression is always called as pattern matching. Okay, so you have to do pattern matching by regular expression. So the regular expression denoting the syntax, the words that you use to identify the patterns. Okay, sorry, to define the patterns. Okay, so let me explain you the example, then you will understand really what I'm going to say with respect to I and pattern matching. So first I will show you my input file. So this input file is like the first two paragraphs of my resume, my profile. So which has my summary and then a few highlights I just filtered from my resume. So it has some URLs. You can see my input file and the highlights. It says I have my own YouTube channel, the URL of the channel, and then I'm writing blogs and channel.org, which is another URL which has a sub page as well, which is knowledge base. And then finally you can see I have done a self-published book and that has been posted in my website, which is knowledge.com and books slash books. So I just want to fetch all these URLs from my paragraph. So I just copied this profile.txt to my Python. So I don't want to give my full path. So files inside my Python actually. And now you can see profile.txt here. Now comes the program. Okay, so here I'm using regular expression, and one more thing I wanted to say, we have many other solutions to achieve this. For example, you have URL extractor, a library itself exists in Python. With that you can directly give your files an input, and you can fetch all the URLs. You don't want to do any kind of regular expression activities like this line. So the line number 5, something like that. You don't want. This is what regular expression, which is used to do identify the patterns, so define the pattern. So you prepare the pattern via regular expression, and this Python will search for this particular pattern in the given file. Okay, so this is another native solution which exists in Python itself, which is regular expression. Or you can use any other third-party libraries as well. You have many solutions. So here, if you are much interested in doing regular expression and pattern matching, so if you go for some website which has this topic, which covers the Python regular expression and pattern matching, you can see some tab in which they will be showing you the syntaxes for the pattern matching. If you use this particular syntax, you can do this kind of pattern matching. If you do this syntax, if you use this symbol, you can do so and so pattern matching. So that is something very cool and interesting things to learn actually. So you can learn those stuff. Okay, if you are interested, else you can use some third-party libraries to achieve this. Else you can define your own regular expression and then you can do the pattern matching. So now I'm just iterating the file to read line by line from the paragraph, the profile, what I have uploaded, means the text file. Okay, so I'm reading line by line. So that's why I'm doing the iteration here, and then I'm defining URLs, which is just a variable equal to, this is not syntax, this is just a variable equal to all.find all, and then here you can see the pattern which needs to be matched with each line. Okay, I'm iterating, I'm giving this line here, whatever I have specified in the for loop, I'm giving here. So HTTPS and followed by whatever the content we have till the slash. Okay, so slash. So that is what I'm defining here as a pattern matching. So the question mark gives you the unrecognized stuff what we have not given in the pattern matching. It's followed by, imagine it's like followed by. Now I'm just doing another file operation here, which is write. So I have something called URL extract. So the output I'm writing into a file. After extracting the URL, I'm writing into this file. So then I have to iterate the items in the URL. Okay, so this URL returns list as the outcome. Okay, this is not a string. Okay, the output will be in list. So I'm iterating the list, and then I'm using write lines functions to write this in a file with slash and as a delimiter. That's it. Now I just want to show you that this particular URL is a list. Okay, I'm just enabling this print statement. If I run this, you can able to see it's generating a list. And again, I can comment this print statements.
Pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes it's difficult. I did two tests already, and the questions they have are not exactly what I wrote, because there's has been some time since I did the test. So it might be the case that the questions are not necessarily what I've written here. So it's difficult to know exactly what they were asking for the first time just by reading this and studying. So it might seem easy looking at the videos, but the questions might be more tricky. I don't think I'll take more notes though on these ones. Oh, we will only take notes on these ones, I think. Because I think these notes here are enough, probably. Even if I don't pass the test. And the thing about this test is that it's extremely difficult to come up with tests that are actually relevant for coding, because usually you just search stuff, and it's more important to be able to, in my eyes at least, to think about how things are connected and what kind of stuff to search and how to break down the problem, so you can search the pieces and solve anything that comes up. So
Django has a lot of built-in validation for its fields. So when we render out a Django field or a Django form, we actually can submit some data, and Django will check to make sure that data matches that built-in validation. So I'll give it a number in the decimal field, for example. But there's a lot more things that we can do than just what's built in, and that's what we're going to do in this one.
And this, I think, is an example because I'm pretty sure I used this thing here on my project, but I don't remember exactly how to implement, or I think I roughly remember where I implemented, but yeah, it would be something that I would just look it up. It's not that hard.
So if we take a look at the model form, which is now what we're going to use, I'm going to show you that it's really simple to override the field themselves, right? So if I actually bring this title in over here, I see that this is the same name as that one. So that's actually how you override what comes in by default. Kind of a cool little feature to have. So now what hopefully you realize, and I did mention the last one, but now these forms are actually identical. They have the same three fields. The only thing that's different is how the view handles them. That's it. But we're going to go back to using that product form itself. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out all of this, and we'll come back into our original product create view that we were using. Okay. So what I have here is a shortcut method to what I did up here. Right. So I request post and then render these things out. All this does is renders out that form if post data comes through. Otherwise, we'll just render out an empty form. That's all that's going on right there. Okay, cool. So now that I understand that, what I want to do is just take a look further with this is valid related stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look, make sure my form is coming through. I'm refreshing here, and I've got my price, my field is required. So it's possible that I might need to save a few things here. Let's make sure everything's saved up. We've got our forms. There we go. And we refresh. Our title goes away. And if I go back on create, it shows me that I have my placeholder there. So yes, I can absolutely just copy all of these things in here as well. And once I do that, I have a more robust form in the sense of how I want it to look and almost how I want it to work. So when you do this, you realize that you did change quite a bit. And yeah, there's absolutely shortcuts to doing this. There's third-party packages that do a lot of this stuff for us, which we're not going to talk about yet because it's getting a little bit too advanced. But instead what I'm talking about is like, what if I want my title to be, to contain a certain word? Let's say I want my title to contain CFE, right? So that word itself, or those initials itself. What I need to do here is come in and say define clean underscore, then my field name. So whatever field that I'm going to be grabbing the validation for, this is what I want to do. Clean title, right? So I want to make sure my title has a specific item in there. So we just say self, and we do R's and keyword R's. Those are probably not necessary, but oftentimes if you're not sure when you override something, just make sure you put R's and keyword R's. So to get the actual title itself, we do self.cleanedData.get title. Okay, so this is going to get the default title. This is going to get the post Django form cleaning. So Django will clean the form itself initially, and then it's going to trigger this title. In other words, this is not overriding required, for example. That required will absolutely still be in there. And to validate this, we just are going to go ahead and say if title, or rather if CFE in title, then we'll return, well, do we want to do it this way? Right, so let's just do the logic first. So if CFE is in the title, then we'll return that title, so whatever the default is. Otherwise, we'll do raise forms.validation error. This is not a valid title. Okay, so we save that, and let's take a look. Refreshing here, I'll say ABC, hit submit. Hey, this is not a valid title. There is our validation. It's really, really simple. I mean, it's not that advanced or that complex. And of course, I actually wouldn't write it in this format. What I would do instead is say if not in the title, then raise the validation, and the default returning the title. And the reason for this is so I can have multiple validations if I wanted to. If news is not in the title, not a valid title, right? So ABC space, we got two not invalid. Well, let's actually save and refresh this. Let's do that again. So I say ABC, I hit save. I've got this is not a valid title. Okay, so right off the bat, it will raise that one. Now, assuming that I put CFE in here like that and hit save, again, it's going to say not a valid title. So it would have to validate all of these conditions that you might have. And of course, these aren't realistic ones for a title. This would probably be more realistic for like an email. So let's say, for instance, if I did clean email, and we did email. I'll throw this email in just a second, the actual field itself. So let's just go ahead and say if not, or rather if email ends with .edu, or if not ends with .edu, then we'll do raise forms.validation error. This is not a valid email. And we can return that email. And since I'm doing this, this is a new little feature that you might end up using, is you can say email equals to forms.email field. Notice it's not a model form, it's certainly not a model. So I'm refreshing here, I got my email field in there, I say abc@gmail.com, I hit save, not a valid email. So it's pretty cool. Validation is fairly simple, and then you can run any sorts of validation things on here. Now, I will say that doing validation is not only on a form, but since we've been working in these forms, it's a really good way to introduce validation as a concept. You can absolutely do validation on the fields for a model as well, but the idea for validation works whether it's a model form or just a standard Django form. And what you should see, or hopefully this pattern that you're noticing, is that if I commented this out and change this to a form, the form itself will render the exact same. All of the validation will render the same, all of that. But of course, the one caveat is how the actual form would work in the view. It is slightly different. So if you have any questions on validation, please let me know. Otherwise, make sure you subscribe to everything. We're going to be doing so much more Django stuff, and stay with us.
I think I'll spend a lot of time on this topic.
वैसे यहाँ पर हम देखेंगे कि पासवर्ड को हमें हैश करना है। पासवर्ड हैश क्यों करते हैं वो मैं आपको दिखाऊंगा। सबसे पहले हम यहाँ पर आते हैं अपने कस्टमर्स में, तो एडमिन में लॉगिन करेंगे, एंड कस्टमर्स है, कस्टमर का पासवर्ड यहाँ पे देख सकते हो कि मैं एडमिन को चीज देख सकता हूँ, पासवर्ड देख पा रहा हूँ कि यूजर पासवर्ड क्या है। इवन ऐसा होता है कि पासवर्ड जो एडमिन होता है, एडमिन को पासवर्ड पता नहीं चलना चाहिए, कि एडमिन को पासवर्ड पता नहीं होता है, ठीक है। तो इस केस में क्या करते हैं, पासवर्ड को हैश करते हैं। पासवर्ड हैश करने का क्या मतलब है, पासवर्ड हैश करने का मतलब ये है कि आपने यूजर ने मुझे यहाँ पर क्या दिया 1 2 3, ठीक है। तो यूजर ने जो एंटर किया पासवर्ड 1 2 3 4 5 6, तो क्या
Hello and welcome to Code Bytes. In this video, I'll be showing you how to store passwords in Django. And this implementation is not the only one. There are certain other ways to store passwords in Django, but this method I find it quite easy and it's also very secure. So it's just something which I prefer. So first of all, you need to install the password module. For that, just open your terminal and write it install password hit enter. I've already installed this module. So now I'll show you a quick implementation in the Python shell itself. So first, just import the module from password.bash code to right. So first of all, we'll encrypt plain text string, and then I'll show you how to verify it. So encrypted string equals 6 dot encrypt. So this is the method. Sorry, encrypt. So this is the method we use to encrypt a plain text string. And first thing we provide here is our password in the string format. So my password 123 rounds equals 1000 size equals 32. Enter. And if we print the string, so you can see this long string. So this is the encrypted form of your password. That is encrypted form of the string my password 123. And you can see it gives a different. Yes, this make in this. So first we provide. This is exactly the string which has been encrypted and stored in this variable. You can check for some other string. My password 456. So it would give false over here. So we have seen the basic implementation. Now we'll see how to implement this thing in our Django project. So I'm here in my Django project. So first thing we need to do is import the module. So from password hash import. So here we need to store, and the first thing we need to provide is the raw string, that is password, that is this variable. Here we have stored the password in the plain text form. So we have our encrypted password stored in this variable. So come on. Sorry.
Requests and responses in Django. A fundamental function of any website or web application is receiving requests and returning responses. Requests and responses in a Django implemented website go through 2 phases, the request phase and the response phase. Each phase has several steps. Understanding these steps, how they work, and what they can do will give you insight into how various parts of Django work. The request phase. The first stage of a request is the web server. Regardless of which web server you use, a web server's primary function is to accept the request and to figure out what to do with it. Early web servers simply map the request to a file and return the file's contents. It is still very useful to configure the web server to do that with your site's media, such as images, scripts, and style sheets. Most current web servers now allow you to pass a request to a script or other process. In the Django-based site, we'll configure the web server to route requests to a script that implements the web server gateway interface, or WSGI. WSGI is a Python specification that maps the HTTP request into Python objects and executes a stack of one or more applications. The WSGI application at the bottom of the stack in our site is Django. WSGI applications above Django in the stack are called middleware. The Python object is passed through the stack where the middleware can preprocess a request. While it isn't typical to use WSGI middleware in Django projects, you can use them for some very low-level operations like logging. The first thing Django does with the request is wrap it in its own HTTP request object. Anything in Django that deals with the request uses this HTTP request object. Before processing the request, Django emits the request started signal. This signal is subscribable by applications to do things before anything else. For example, Django uses this signal to clear out its log of database queries executed. Django then passes this request through the middleware stack. Now let's do a quick aside about Django middleware. Django middleware is a class that implements one or more of the following functions: process request, process view, process template response, and process exception. The middleware classes are arranged as an ordered stack. Each of the functions is called at different times and in different orders. In the request phase, they are called in ascending order. In the response phase, they are called in descending order. Now back to the Django request phase. Django executes the process request method, if implemented, of each of the middleware classes in ascending order. The process request method is typically used in two ways: to add to the HTTP request object, or to preemptively return a response. You should consider most of the default attributes read-only, but you can add attributes. For example, Django session middleware adds a session attribute, and the authentication middleware adds a user attribute to the request. You may want to preemptively return a response, like Django's common middleware does, redirecting the user to a different URL if it's missing a slash at the end of the request, or denying the request based on one of the HTTP headers. If your process request method does return a response, no further process request methods are executed in the middleware stack, and the response immediately goes to the process response step discussed later. After Django has executed the process request methods of its middleware stack, it loads its URL configuration patterns. The default URL configuration is defined in the project settings and is typically URLs. However, if one of the middleware's process request methods adds a URL attribute to the request, Django will use it instead. The URL configuration is a hierarchical list of regular expressions used to route a requested path to a view. Entering the URL configuration could be specific, like if the request is for About Us, use the About Us view. The URL configuration can specify a very generic pattern, like any request that starts with blog, and instead of specifying a view, it can specify another URL configuration to continue the matching. This allows loose coupling between the project and the individual Django applications. You can capture parts of the URL regular expression that are passed as positional arguments or keyword arguments of the view as well. Once the URL configuration matches the requested path with a view, it's back to the middleware stack to call each class's process view method. The process view step allows middleware classes to inspect the view that Django is going to execute and the arguments it will pass. You can alter the arguments or return your own response. Django's own cross-site request forgery middleware uses process view to check if the view has an attribute marking it exempt from checks. A final step in the request phase is the view. In the simplest sense, a view is a callable Python object that accepts an HTTP request object and returns an HTTP response object. Views might also accept arguments that are derived from parts of the request path. The response phase. The view handles all the business logic, which is different from the presentation logic handled by the template. Business logic decides what data can be shown, while the presentation logic decides if and how the data is presented. The view finds all the data required for the response and performs any actions necessary. The data is put in a context dictionary. The view can do one of two things. It can either render the template itself and return it within an HTTP response, which will skip the next step, or it uses the template response, which allows for the next step, process template response middleware. If the HTTP response object returned by the view has a render method, like the template response does, Django calls the process template response method for each middleware class in reverse order. The middleware can alter the context data, or the template. It can return its own HTTP response as well. Next, we will render the template. Regardless of whether the view rendered the template or Django called the response's render function, the process is the same. A template is converted into the final response. Template rendering involves a template and a context dictionary. A simple template might just have variables that are substituted with the values associated with that key in the context. More complex templates can introspect the context to decide how to play the data intelligently. Templates have access to filters used to provide special formatting to data, and template tags, which can do just about anything. Filters and template tags are custom Python code, so you can enforce any business rules. For easier management, templates can extend and include other templates. Finally, Django goes through the middleware stack one more time in reverse order, calling each class's process response method. The process response method of the middleware stack is always executed when any part of Django returns an HTTP response object. The process response method must return an HTTP response object, even if it is just the same object passed to it. It can alter the existing response, or it can make its own instead. After the middleware is finished with the response, Django emits a request finished signal, similar to the request started signal emitted at the beginning of the request phase. Applications can subscribe to this signal to handle any cleanup tasks, like Django does. Django then converts its HTTP response object into the appropriate WSGI response, and returns that back through the WSGI stack. If any WSGI middleware is used, it can alter the responses as necessary. Finally, the WSGI response is returned to the web server. The web server converts the WSGI response into its own native format and passes it back to the user. In summary, the entire process looks like this. The user makes a request, which the web server receives, and passes on to the WSGI application stack and Django. Django emits the request started signal before sending the request through the middleware stack calling the process request method. Next, Django loads its URL configuration and figures out which view to execute. This information is sent through the middleware stack calling the process view method. Django calls the view, which returns a response. If the response is a template response, the response goes through the middleware stack in reverse order, calling the process template response method. Django calls the template response's render method to render the template if the view has not rendered the template before returning its response. The final response goes through the middleware again in reverse order, calling the process response method. Django emits the request finished signal just before Django sends its response back through the WSGI stack. The WSGI stack hands off the response to the web server, which sends it to the user. I hope you've enjoyed this training video. Look for more to come soon.
It's a really good video. think that answers the question. Next one. Maybe we should wait a day for doing the jungle, because I'm reading a book about I forgot. As network programming in Python. Maybe that might help in the tests. But I don't think in a day I can learn all this stuff probably from the book. And I'm not even sure if they're gonna talk about anything like that. I think this one I already know. Maybe we should search for Django default cache. I wanna search for videos if possible because I don't wanna waste a lot of time because there are a lot of things to look at. And I just wanna study this fast so I can do the tests as fast as possible so I can move on to the other stuff that I have to do. That I want to focus on actually. You'll watch this one later because it's in Portuguese. So there's caching, cookies, this form. Yeah, I think I'm gonna leave cache for later to watch all these videos off string because they're very long. It looks like most of the questions are about caching. And I think it's a good thing to study this because I'm probably gonna have to use it on the project. It's probably really important. And I remember I just got to the part in the book that they're starting to talk about this, which is nice. Yeah, I think I'm gonna leave the Django task for later, probably, until I finish the chapter that I have on the book. So probably 2 more days. And then watch out these videos and then do the other tasks first.
So now we're going to talk
Probably
about data
better.
validation. Data validation is what happens when you hit the submit button and then that data is sent to the server. And what the server does is it checks that post data that it's getting to see if it's proper according to its rules. So if you go back to this picture I showed you in the create form, the part we're talking about now is really this part right here, where the user has entered their data, they've hit the submit button, and we in the server are going to look at that data. And then we're going to decide if it's an error, send back a form, or store the data. And we're actually sort of just have a comment say store the data.
I think I watched this video already, but I don't think that's
In comes a GET request.
that's not what they're asking here, probably. Because I remember there's something about a form validation that is different. It's something that you can use, I think, that is different than doing standard form validation. Or maybe this one.
Django has a lot of built-in validation for its fields. So when we render out a Django field or a Django form, we actually can submit some data, and Django will check to make sure that data matches that built-in validation. So like if it's a number in the decimal field, for example. But there's a lot more things that we can do than just what's built in, and that's what we're going to do in this one. So if we take a look at the model form, which is now what we're going to use, I'm going to show you that it's really simple to override the field themselves, right? So if I actually bring this title in over here, I see that this is the same name as that one. So that's actually how you override what comes in by default. Kind of a cool little feature to have. So now what hopefully you realize, and I did mention the last one, but now these forms are actually identical. They have the same 3 fields. The only thing that's different is how the view handles them. That's it. But we're going to go back to using that product form itself. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out all of this, and we'll come back into our original product create view that we were using. Okay, so what I have here is a shortcut method to what I did up here, right? So that request post and then render these things out. All this does is renders out that form if post data comes through. Otherwise, we'll just render out an empty form. That's all that's going on right there. Okay, cool. So now that I understand that, what I want to do is just take a look further with this is valid related stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look, make sure my form is coming through. I'm refreshing here, and I've got my price, my field is required. So it's possible that I might need to save a few
I think I
things here.
just watched this video. I watched a lot of this guy's videos when I was doing the project, so I don't remember really well. But I think these ones specifically I just watched. This I think it has probably something to do with the keywords of some classes and the authentication process that I remember also using at some point for the validation for the forms. Maybe this one is good. The ones that I don't study now, I'm probably gonna study offstream. And I'm getting tired already, so I'm probably gonna take a break.
All amigos, this is Somved and welcome back to CodePipe. In today's video, we will see how we can use cookies with Django. So without wasting any time, let's go to our editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code for my code editor, and our project is already set up. We have our environment file in dcook. We have our main folder, which is project folder Django cookie. We have an application cookie. Django cookie folder is the base settings file. We have our templates. We have our database. We have a simple view already set up, and if we check our web page, this is the initial web page that we have used in our setup. I'm directly jumping to the coding part because I'm assuming we already know the basic project setup, but still if you want to know how I set up my Django project, there will be a card for the Django project setup video on the top right corner of the screen. Please have a look at that. First of all, we should know what are cookies. Cookies are nothing but data of strings that is collected by the browser from specific websites. So if we inspect this, and if we go to application tab, here you can see we have cookies used by this site. CSRF token is a default cookie which is saved by Django application, so you will find it here. Now without going any further, let me show you what we are going to achieve by the end of this video. And this will be the final homepage. Let's inspect our page, go to application tab, and inside our cookie, we can again see that we have CSRF token as a default. Now let's try to log in. Let's say a@gmail.com, any random email and any random password. Let's submit this. As soon as we submit our templates file, I will create a new file that will say login
from request.post.get, let me say email. Then we need to create one response, which will be render request, and I will say home.html. As this is a post method, if the credentials are okay, we need to print out the home.html, and we will provide some context here, which will be initialized here. And inside this context, we will provide some information, which we will see in a while. Let me comment this out for a while. Now we have our response. Now comes the main part of setting the cookies. We don't need to do any extra setup. We can directly say response.set cookie. So let me say username, and here I will give the value of username that will be stored in this username key. Along with this, I will also set one more cookie that will be login status, and here I will say true. And finally, we will return response. Let me indent this correctly. Before we run this, let me go to our login.html, and in our fields for input, let me give a name of email, so I can get this in our post request. And for the form, I will say method is equal to post. As we have only set up a post method, let me set up a get method also. If request.method is equal to get, we will simply render the login page. That is this one. Let me copy this, put it here. This should work fine. There are no errors in the terminal. Let us check our web page. Our web page is ready. So let me put anything here and any random password, and let's try to submit this. This should save some cookies here. So if I say submit, we forgot to include the CSRF token in our form. So let's do it now. In our login.html, below the form, let us put CSRF token, CSRF_token. Save this and let's try again. Any Gmail or mail, any password. Let's try to put this, and we can say here our login status and username are saved, and we are redirected to the home page. At this point, we know how to set our cookies. Now let's see how to get our cookies. For that, in our home.html, I will comment this out and I will put this code. Let me explain what's going on. First of all, we will check if we have logged in, or let's say login status in request.cookies. Using request.cookies, we can get our cookies. So we are checking for login status and username in our request.cookies. If we have those two things, we will put them into our context and we will render home.html. Otherwise, we will render home.html but without this context. Now using this context, let us change our home.html. Here below this home, let me put a code. So this is a division. Inside this division, I'm checking if username is present in the context or not. And from our views.py, we understood that we are sending username context only if it is present in request.cookies. So if it is present, we can say you are logged in as using the username, and we can also say login status is login status. If the username is already logged in and we have the cookies, we will provide a button for logout. Otherwise, we will say you are not logged in and you need to log in to get to the home page. And finally, we will create one home button so that we can go to our main page, that is login page. So let's save this and go to our browser. Here, if I say home, we don't have a reverse for logout, so let's remove logout for now. So for that, we will remove this URL for logout. Save this and let's try again. Let's refresh this, and here we can say this is home and you are logged in as the username, and we are not getting the login status. And the reason is in our views.py, we need to say login_status. And while we are at this, we can use two methods to get our cookies, which is request.cookies and request.cookies.get. We can use both of these methods to get information from our cookies. Let's save this and try again. If we refresh, here we are getting the login status as true. At this point, we know how to set cookies and how to get cookies. Let me take a moment to make the code more clear. In our views.py, remember in login, we kept our context clear or empty. So here I will use this because we are using a single home.html. So we need to keep the context constant. So here I will say username will be username that we are providing and login status will be true. Let me show you why we are using this context here. In the post method, I remove context from this render, deleted cookies from the cookie tab. Let me try to log in here. So I will say any Gmail, any password, and if I submit, cookies are getting stored, but it is saying you are not logged in. As the home.html is a single HTML file which is used in different views, we need to keep the context similar to all the views. So for that let's make a I will import reverse. So whenever we are logged, direct reverse to login. The logout is in various applications. In this course, we designed and hosted Django.
So the answer is probably MVT. Model view template. And the rest is everything about caching. And superclass. So it's caching, form, and cookies, pretty much.
Let's see how things work in Django. For example, you go to our website www.freshup.com/login. So when you will hit that URL, a request will be generated, and our generated request will pass to some controllers. So in Django, we call them as views. So when the views will receive some request, they will pass some query sets to the models. Models actually help us to interact with database directly. So when they will read and write successfully, they will get our required data from the database and will send some result set to the views. And when the views will receive some result sets, they finally will generate some response to the templates. And in Django, we call them as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript pages. So this is how things work in Django.
And so it's both MVT, MVC, model view controllers, and model view templates.
Hi, this is Shekhar Srinivasan. In this video, we shall understand the differences between the process model of traditional web application development, model view controller, popularly called as MVC web application development, and our Django model view template, popularly called as MVT development model. If you haven't subscribed my channel yet, please do subscribe and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever I upload a new video on the latest technologies. This encourages me to create more and more videos. First, let us start with understanding the process model of traditional web application development. Whenever a client sends a request to the server, the request will be given as HTTP request to the web server, where the server accepts the request, identify the requested web application, and then the requested page will be processed within the web server. And if there is any requirement to interact with the database, then the process interacts with the database, and then it will generate the result, which will be provided as a HTTP response to the client. Now, let us understand how the MVC pattern works. MVC stands for Model View Controller, where model is responsible for managing the data of the application, and it is the application's dynamic data structure which is independent of the user interface and directly manages the data, logic, and also the rules of the application. View is responsible for providing the user interface to present the model data in a particular format. Controller is responsible for the complete orchestration. It is used to accept the request and to provide the response to the client. In short, we can consider that model as business layer, view as presentation layer, and controller as input control. Now, let us understand how the web application developed using MVC will be processed. Whenever a client sends a request to the MVC web application, then the request will be accepted by the controller, and the controller can provide the result as a HTTP response to the client. If the client sends a request for updating the data present within the database, then the controller accepts the request and manipulates the model, which will update the database, and then the updated model details will be received by the controller, and then passes the model data to the view, where the view uses the model data and renders the UI as per the requirement and provides the result to the controller. Wait, the result will be returned to the client as a HTTP response by the controller. One important point we need to remember here is MVC design pattern has been implemented by different companies and vendors. We have ASP.NET MVC, Spring MVC, Ruby on Rails, etc. So some MVC design pattern implementation may vary significantly from the traditional MVC pattern what I have explained in general. Now let us understand model view template pattern, which is used by the Django web framework for its web development. In MVT, model is used to manage and query data through Python objects. Model defines the structure of stored data, including the field properties, default values, selection list options, label text, performs, etc. In most of the frameworks, views means web pages or presentation or UI layers. Where in Django web framework, views are the heart of the web application. They are used to receive HTTP requests from the clients and used to return HTTP response back to the client. In between, they marshal the other resources of the framework to access database, render templates, etc. Finally, we have templates, which is used to specify the structure of an output document using the placeholders for data that will be filled in when a page is generated. Remember, the templates are often used to create HTML content, but it can also be used to create other types of documents. And Django templates can be created using native templating system, popularly called as Django template language, and another popular Python library called as Jinja for creating the template. Now let us understand how Django web application framework works whenever a request has been submitted. Whenever a client sends a request to a Django web application, then the Django framework accepts the request and submits the request to the URLs, where the URLs acts like a URL mapper to redirect HTTP request to the relevant view based on the requested URL. The URL mapper can also match particular pattern of strings or digits that appear in a URL and pass this to a view, where the views accepts the request and process the instructions written within the relevant view method and provides the result as a HTTP response to the client. Now, whenever the client sends a request for a Django web application for interacting with some database and to fetch some data for visualization, then once again, the request will be given to the Django framework. Then it will be redirected to the URLs based on the requested URL pattern. The request will be given to the relevant view, where the view will identify the model to be used for interacting with the database, and it will read or write the data to the model as per the requirement, and it uses a template to provide an efficient user interface for the client. And once the page has been generated by the template by filling its placeholders with the data from the model, view will provide the result as a HTTP response to the clients. Hope you have got a fair idea on understanding the difference between traditional web development, MVC pattern, and MVT pattern used by the Django web application framework. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe my channel and give a like to this video and click on the bell icon to get the notification of my new videos. See you soon.
So I saw this question in the comment section, and I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to make a Django models form tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to create a Django model form, which basically grabs a Django model, a database object, and creates a form based on all the attributes. So we don't have to manually render out an HTML form. We're just going to create that form object and throw it into the template, and it'll create everything for us. And then we're actually going to save that form and show you how that form actually processes an item and adds it to the database. So I set up a base Django application here. I created one model, just as customer with a first and a last name, and I have this template with a form, but it only has that input field, that submit button, and I have this view that renders out that template. So at this point, it just gives us this very blank template. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to follow the Django documentation to create a model form. So we're going to follow this method here, but before we do that, we're going to put our forms into their own file so we can have multiple forms for multiple objects. So for this, I'm going to create a forms.py file. And I'm just going to run the imports right here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste these and make sure that this is all cleared up. So this is what we need in that forms.py file, except for we're going to be using our model, and we're going to import the customer model here. So our models.py file. And now we can create that form. So we're just going to call ours customer form. And I believe you need to throw in model form. And this form right here will take in two attributes. It's going to take the model that we want to represent. So the model is going to be our customer model, and the fields that we want to output. So at this point, we just want to output all the fields that it has. So the first and last name. So we're just going to say fields and just do underscore underscore all, and then underscore underscore. And that should create our form now. So at this point, we need to throw our form into the views file, and just import customer form. So we need to throw our form in here, and then we need to render it out in the template. So we're just going to set the form variable, and that's going to be customer form, and we just throw that into the template like this right here, and context is passed in right here. And now that we have it in here and we're passing it into the template, we can now actually use it in the template. And we just simply use that Jinja method right there and say form. So it represents our customer form at this point, and it should be as easy as that. And there we go, we have our form. So these are the two attributes we specified. And now we want to actually save this form. So at this point, action sends us to, I need to show you the URLs file. This current template gets represented or gets output by that default, that homepage URL. So we're just going to send it back to that URL. So action is to that base URL, and the method we're going to use is post. So this is going to be a post method because we're sending data and we want to create the object. So the first thing we want to do is throw on a CRSF token. Actually need to remember how that was. CSRF underscore token. And this basically just lets Django know that we can accept this as a safe object to take in, or we won't accept it without it. And in here, we want to write a little conditional. So we want to say if request.method is post. So currently it's a get method, but once it's a post method, that means we have some form data to process. So we want to change this up and we want to throw that in again, and we just want to, and I'll actually console out the request method before I do anything else, so we're not console print. So I'll show you the data that the form is giving us first before we actually process this. So at this point, if I just go put my first and last name in here. Okay, so something's not right with that token. Oh, this needs to be a percent sign there. That's why. Now let's just refresh this and test it. Okay, so that sends us that token, the first and last name. So to process this, all we need to do is throw in that post method into the form. And because we're throwing it into the form, it already grabs the attributes that Django provides for us with that, and we say request.post. And
hey,
now
I hope your day's going great. In this Django Forms tutorial for beginners, you will learn how to use Django Forms from the ground up. By the end of this video, you will know how to submit data with forms, what model forms are and how to use them, what bound and unbound forms are, how to use Django Crisp.
I think the rest of this stuff I'm gonna watch off stream about the Django. And I think I'm gonna try to implement caching on my project on chain data. And it's probably gonna be better to learn and then do but maybe not, because I wanna do the tasks fast. I wanna focus more on the data, the blockchain data. Yes, I'm not sure. But either way, I think I want to study the rest of this off stream and do the Django tasks later, after I'm finished with all of the other ones. Let me, maybe I don't remove from here. I think I'm only gonna remove tasks after I finish them from this list here. This on NextJS. I think I know the answer to this, but look anyway. Maybe I'll watch this one before going.
Now
to
we know how
next
to grab
stuff.
raw HTML form data in Django. It's time to start adapting it to using just a basic Django form, so a pure Django form. So I'm actually going to, again, comment all of this out, copy it, and paste it over. Probably should have copied it first, but, you know, whatever. Okay, so again, I'm going to go ahead and delete all this because we're basically starting from zero, or as if we were starting from zero. Okay, so I've got my view here, and then I want to open up forms again. Just go ahead and ignore this for now, but it is not a bad reference. So I'll just go ahead and say class raw product form, and it takes in forms.form. So it's not model form, just standard Django form. So with the standard Django form, we have to declare our inputs. So in my case, I've just been using model, but I can go further than that, and we use forms.charfield.
Okay, so we got to the point now where
we can say description, and we'll also do forms.charfield as well. And then we will say price, and forms.decimal field. So these should look very similar to our models, and that's because they are. So we've got a decimal field, char field, and we don't actually have text field. So if you try to do text field, it's not going to work. I'll discuss that later. But we'll just do char field. And honestly, if you wanted some reference to that, you just do Django form fields, and it should give you the field types in here. Right? So form fields, all of the various field types are in here. So you can absolutely use any of those, but you know, text field is not there. So these all render out a specific look by default. So if I grab this form, bring it back into my view, or bring it into my view, not back into it, we have to render out this form. So to render it out, we create an instance of the form. So we'll say form is that. This creates an instance of that form, as you may be familiar with Python and how you create instances from a class. We add that form into our context. Okay, so again, we could say my form here, and then have form there. So going off that product create, so back in that HTML, I'm gonna get rid of this here and just do form.asp. So this renders it out as paragraph text. So if we save this and take a look there, let's just refresh that page. I can inspect the element and take a look and see that, hey, we've got our form, we've got an action, we have our CSRF middleware token, that security token, we have some key tags in here, and that's as P. These are the ones like as HTML, or no, not as HTML, but as LI, or is it UL, something like that. Yeah, there you go. So you can render it out as UL, it is HTML, so as HTML doesn't make sense. But as P is the way to render it out, and now we have a form with some data. So I can add in whatever I like, right, and hit save. Now, naturally, what just happened was we submitted the data to our form here, or at least it seemed like we did, but we didn't. We didn't do anything, right? So this form itself is just rendering out. It's not actually getting any of that data, and that's why I use request.post here. So if I save that just as is and refresh it here, let's just refresh in this page, and I see that now it's giving me these validation errors. These are called validation errors. This is awesome. This is built into Django right away. It's already validating stuff for me, unlike the HTML. The HTML absolutely was not. But it's asking, like, well, why are validation errors even happening at this point, right? So we see that this field is required, but how does Django already know that? Well, it has to do with what I initialize it with. So I have it in as request post. So let's make this work using kind of a long way at first. We'll say if request.method equals to post, right? So again, that's built into the request object itself that's being passed. So if the method is equal to post, then that's going to be my form. I'll actually use that data in my form. In other words, I'll pass in that request post data as I initialize my form. So I also have to initialize the form by default. So I need a get method for it, and that's where this comes in, right? So I render it for the get method so I can see what it looks like, and then with the post method, which is a different type of request, which means that I still have to render it for that different type of request. So we've got, this is roughly request.get, right? So that's what it's passing in by default, but request.get doesn't have anything, probably, so we'll go ahead and leave that out. And now this will actually handle my form data. So if I save this, and refresh in here and hit save, it's now saying please fill out this form, and that is based off of my browser, see that it says required there. So if I actually remove that, right, so I literally removed it from the code in the elements, you don't have to do this, it's been validated.
I think the reason why I didn't see this stuff is because I didn't use templates, so...
I'd like to replace this text with some kind of logo instead, an image. Now, to work with images, we're going to have to talk about static assets in Next applications, and the way we work with them is very, very simple. All we do is place them inside this public folder, and anything inside here is made accessible from the browser. So we can already see this image right here, an SVG file, and that was something that the boilerplate Next application that we created used initially. We don't need it anymore, though, so we can delete it if we want. What I'm going to do is also place in another image, this ninja list icon right here. So this is what we're going to use inside our navbar. Now, to do that, we're going to go to the content folder and then navbar, and we're going to place an image right here, so img. Now, I'm not going to have an alt for this just yet, and then the source right here is just going to be / and then whatever the path is inside the public folder to that image. So in our case, just logo.png, and that's all there is to it. So if I save this now and preview, we can see this gigantic ninja list icon right there. Okay, so that's how we use images. Now, something new that Next version 10 brings to the table is the image component, and we can use this instead of this img tag. So what I'm going to do is try using that instead. So let me say import, and it's going to be image from next / image. And then all we need to do is replace this right here with image like so instead. Now, we still have a source attribute, which is exactly the same, but check this out. If I save it now, and come over here, we get an error. And if we take a look at that error, it says this image component must use width and height properties. So it forces us to add these properties to images, and it's 77. So if another good thing about using it, it's only going to load in the image when we later. So sometimes you might ninja list or ninja list homepage do anything that goes inside the head. So all we need to do is use that component down here, and then we can place any title or metadata inside it. And what Next will do is take that and insert it into the head of our documents. So let's do that. So I'm going to place the head above the div like this, and then inside the head is where we do the title and metadata. But first of all, notice all of this error right here, and that's because now we have two root components. We have the head and the div next to each other inside the return, and we can't do that in a React component. It has to be a single returned element. So what I'm going to do is a fragment to surround this, which is just an empty tag, and then I'm going to indent this. Okay, cool. So inside the head, we want a title tag first of all, and for this I'll just say ninja list, then I'll do a pipe, and then I'll say home. So that gives, and then it's going to paste it in here. Again, we need to surround this now with a fragment like so.
This stuff.
What's going on, guys? Clint here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to load images into your Next.js application along with some different scenarios and the best use cases. So one of the benefits of using Next.js, as we know, is built-in image optimization. And here I am just on the Next.js image documentation page. So some of the things, the ways that Next.js optimizes our images is one, it provides lazy loading by default. Two, it optimizes file sizes, leading to increased speed and performance. And finally, it adds visual stability to our web app. Meaning basically our layout will not shift whenever our application is loading images. So to take advantage of all this, we need to use the image component that Next.js provides to us. So looking at the documentation here, Next.js, we must use one of the following import methods for our images. So number one, we can use a statically imported image, which is also like a locally stored image like I have here in my public folder. You'll see our image here, nice image that we're going to be using. So also you can use an external URL path string, which would be from an API, or you could pull from another website, for example, like Pexels or Unsplash. And finally, you can use an internal path string, but in that case, you're going to have to use a loader prop and do some extra configuration, which we're not going to do in this video. And in fact, in most cases that I've come across so far, I'm just dealing with locally stored images, like statically imported images and images from APIs or other websites. So let's go and have a look here. So in our index.js here, I'm going to jump on over to my server here. Typically in a React.js application, you would import an image like this, right? And this is just an external file path here from unsplash.com. So and there you can see our image is displaying. It looks great. However, we're not going to get any of the benefits we just talked about if we just use the image tag like that. And something to note here, you cannot Next.js will not allow you to import images like you would typically in React.js. It's just not going to work properly. It's not going to load. So in order to take advantage of all that awesome stuff, let's add our image component for Next.js. So the first step is up here at the top. What we want to do is import image from next/image. So and I already imported my image here that we're going to jump into in just a moment. So now that we have access to our image component from Next.js, we can use it anywhere inside our function. So I'm just going to say image just like that and close it off. And I'm going to get this in alt tag here. And inside the image, what we can say is I'm going to get the source here just like that. And we're going to use our BG image. And we should see our image over here on the right, and that looks awesome. Now it's important to note that when you're statically importing an image, just like we did, this is a statically imported image. You do not have to specify the width and height of the image because Next.js is storing this image in our public folder. Therefore, it already knows the dimensions. However, whenever we use an external URL, we will need to add some extra properties to our image component. And the external URLs like we did in that lowercase img. So like I said, what if we are grabbing this like that? We're grabbing it from an API endpoint or from another website. So you'll see that right after that we get an error. It says you must use the width and height properties or the layout fill property. And these are simply two different methods. You can say that. And I like to use, I'm sure how to do both. I like to use the layout fill just like that. And that way it'll display the entire width and height of the screen. But before, if we're using externally URL file, what it says you get this error is hosting images.unsplash.com, which is where my image is hosted here, is not configured under your images in your Next.js next.config.js. So what we do is just add make some changes to that, but don't wait for some here. So what I'm going to do is just open up my side menu and we're going to find the next.config.js. And it should look something like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace that here. And I'm going to say images. We're going to say domains. Okay. And in here what we're going to do is add couple brackets, and we can just, it actually tells us what hosting to add. So images.unsplash.com. So what we're going to do, we're going to put that in quotes. We're going to say images.unsplash.com. Now also something to note, if you're pulling from multiple different APIs or URLs, then you're going to need to add those. Maybe not APIs, but if you're pulling from different URLs, you're going to have to add another website.com or something like that. But in this video, I'm just pulling from Unsplash here. So let's go back into our Next.js image. Once we added that here, also something to note, you do need to restart your server. So make sure you restart your server, otherwise you're not going to see any of those changes. So now that I stopped my server, I'm going to go ahead and start back up. And once I reload, that should get rid of all of the errors there. And there we go. Perfect. That's what we want right there. So another thing we like to do, for example here, we're using the layout fill, which what that means is it expands the full width and height of the viewport here. So we also have access to object fit property, and it's just like CSS, it's just a CSS object fit. So you can use cover, contain, fill. I'm going to use here. I like to use different ones really. I like to use the object fit cover if it's going to be like a full width screen images. That way it just maintains the aspect ratio, which looks really nice. Or sometimes I like to use the contain if I do not want the image to take up the full width and height of the screen. So but hey, what if you don't want to use the layout fill, you want a lot smaller images? So what you can also do, I'm just going to
comment that out. In fact, I'll just delete it. We're going to get this here again, like we just saw. You must use width and height properties. So this image is actually quite large. So I'm going to scale down a bit because it's actually like 1920 by 2080. But what I'm going to do is add a width here, and we actually don't need brackets. I don't know for some reason it gives brackets, but you want to put it as a string here. And I'm just going to say 192 for the width, and for my height, I'm going to say 288, which is quite small. But you can see our image is displaying correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and just go back here. I like this object fill, object contain. I like that. So just to recap, you guys. In fact, I'm going to give you something a little bit of a bonus here. So you notice whenever we reload our page, just like that, you can see the image flicker. And NextJS offers a really cool tool to get around that. It's super simple. All you have to say is just add a property here to your image component. You just say priority, just like that. And now if you notice, whenever you refresh your page, the image does not flicker. It stays on the page no matter if you even while refreshing. So this is something that you want to have only something in the initial viewport of your site. You're not going to want to add anything. You're not going to want to add this priority property to any of the image components that is outside your initial loading of viewport. So just to recap here, remember when using an external URL, we must.
This one's kind of generic, so I'm just gonna mark. I don't even know why I wrote this at the time.
A lot for you, which means there's probably some features that you haven't used. In this video, I'm going to be covering 10 Next.js tips that you might not know. First up, redirects. So after Next.js 9.5, redirects were added directly into the framework, allowing you to take an incoming request and output it to a different destination. So whether that's an internal path or an external path to some other website, you have support to do things like path matching or wildcard matching. For example, if you wanted to do an entire directory of blog posts. And an example of this would be for my website. If I go to lirod.io/YouTube, this is actually going to redirect externally to my YouTube channel. Number two is rewrites, and these are also introduced in Next.js 9.5. They function similar to redirects, but they work as a proxy. So you specify some source, and Next.js will take care of masking that and forwarding it to the destination. So for example, let's say that you're trying to incrementally adopt Next.js as part of your tech stack, and you've rebuilt a new version of your documentation. Now, all these links on this page don't exist in your new application. So when I click on one of these links, I actually want to forward it to the existing site, but I want to mask the URL so that it looks like the user didn't actually leave the site. Number three is preview mode. So let's say you're working with a headless CMS or some external data source, and you want to preview a draft of your content. Now, if you're working with static generation where the output of your website is just HTML files, this actually doesn't work very well, and preview mode solves that. So preview mode allows you to see a statically generated version of this draft content. For example, if we go over to this demo, we have a statically generated site, and there's an edit button in the bottom right. And when I click this edit button, it allows me to edit any part of this page, and then when I save it, I'm going to get this unique URL that's generated with preview mode. So now, if I copy this URL and let's say I navigate here instead, we're seeing this statically generated version of our application in preview mode with our unique content. Number four is hooking into the build process. So I pull up some code for my personal site, lirod.io, which I'll link in the description below. It's open source. And when I'm running next build, I want to generate a sitemap for my site. Now, by overriding next.config.js, we can customize our webpack configuration and say when next build runs, I actually want to run this node script. So I have a simple node script here that generates out this sitemap, but this could be anything. It could be a sitemap script, RSS feed, indexing, a search with Algolia, anything. While we're here in next.config.js, we can talk about number five, which is using Preact. So you can actually swap out React with Preact very easily in Next.js. Now, the easiest way to do this, in my opinion, is you only swap it out in the client production build. So by overriding webpack, you can basically swap out and tell Next.js, hey, instead of looking at React, just use Preact instead. Now, why would you do this? In practice, if you're not using any of the advanced React features, Preact will help you ship less JavaScript to the client, which will in turn likely give you better performance. So it's something to experiment and test out with on your site. Note that as newer React features come out, like concurrent mode and React server components, which I have a video on that I'll link below, these may or may not be compatible with Preact, so use this at your own risk. The sixth is absolute imports and module path aliases. So rather than having to have multiple levels of nested paths, so having import statements that might look like this, which can get kind of out of hand, you can use absolute imports and module path aliases to define where your folders are inside of either a jsconfig.json or a tsconfig, such that inside of your components, you can now use this nice shorthand notation to import your files. Number seven is a CRUD API route. Now, CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete, which are common methods that you can use when building APIs. And what you're looking at here is a Next.js API route, a single file that allows you to handle all of the different types of methods. So I'll put a get, a post, and a delete. And what this might look like in practice is I have an API route here for views, and if I call this with a post, I want it to increment the views. But if I call it with a get, I actually want to fetch the view count. So look at this view counter component I have. You'll see I'm making a request here for a get, which has a different behavior than when I call it here with a post. The eighth is setting response HTTP headers for both API routes and serverless functions. So in this example, I'm pulling the response variable and I'm setting a cache control header for this API route. Now what this means is when I'm on my dashboard and I'm fetching these subscribers, you see I have a status of 304, which means it's not modified because this value has been cached. The ninth is an interesting trick which can be used in a couple different ways. So I'm just going to show you an example. Let's say I have pages/index.js and I want to specify maybe a title, description, and image for my meta tags for Open Graph sharing on the web basically. I'm able to export this function home from my component and I can set different properties on that function. So maybe I want a title, maybe I want a description, etc. Now when you're using _app.js, which allows you to share things between pages, there is this component prop, which is going to give you access to that title. So you could use this to then create a shared layout for all the different components that have a dynamic title, a dynamic description, a dynamic image, preventing you from having to do that inside of every single page file. The 10th and final tip might blow your minds. I want to say this one for last. You might only use Next.js on the web, but what if I told you that you could build mobile-like experiences with Next.js? Max, who's the creator of Ionic, which is a framework allowing you to build native apps using web technologies, has also created this library called Capacitor.js, and it can do some pretty interesting things. So you can do things like hot module reloading with Next.js and still get a native-like experience with your app. So the example he has here is using Tailwind, and it looks really cool. I'm excited to see how this will progress and how close we can get to a native-like experience. I think there's some pretty neat things here like modals and swipe to close, really long virtual lists, all kinds of really neat stuff. So check this out if you're interested in building native-like experiences with Next.js. So that's it, everyone. Hopefully you found these 10 tips helpful. Everything that I showed in the video will be linked in the description below. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more videos like this. Thanks.
There's so much stuff to learn. All these videos are super long. I think I can mark that as done.
What are edge functions and how are they different than serverless functions? That's one of the questions I get asked the most. So in this video, I'm going to do my best to explain you what edge functions are and what's the difference between them and serverless functions. Before we can understand edge functions, we first need to understand what serverless functions are. Simply put, serverless functions are functions that are run in the cloud. So basically, you can define a function, put the function in the cloud, and then call that function with the URL. There are many places you can place your functions in. For example, with AWS, you have AWS Lambda, and with Azure, you have Azure functions. Another way you might already be using serverless functions is with Vercel and NextJS API routes. And that's because NextJS API routes are actually run as serverless functions. So with NextJS API routes, when you deploy your application to Vercel and after that make a request to your API route, there is not a traditional web server running 24/7 waiting for you to call that function. The function is actually started and executed independently when you make the request. I know this can be a little bit hard to wrap your head around, and to be honest, I don't either fully understand everything that goes down behind the scenes, but I think the most important part is that we understand the basic principle behind that logic and behind serverless functions. Advantages of using serverless functions compared to traditional web servers or virtual machines is that you only pay when the function is executed and not for the uptime of the server. Another advantage is that serverless functions are easier to scale, and that's thanks to the fact that you can just spin up more instances of them easily when you need them instead of setting up new servers. One of the biggest disadvantages of serverless functions is the possible slow startup times. This happens when a serverless function needs to do so-called cold start. And cold starts happen when a serverless function is not used frequently and a service provider, for example Vercel, needs to spin up a new serverless instance from scratch, and that takes some time. Another disadvantage is high latency. So serverless functions are executed in the data center where they are deployed to. So for example, if you deploy your function to a server in San Francisco and someone from New Delhi calls that function, the geographical distance between the client and the server is so long that it will take some time for the request to travel from New Delhi to San Francisco and then back to New Delhi. And in these kind of cases, the latency will be higher. So in conclusion, serverless functions are executed in the cloud on an as-needed basis. Advantages are pricing and that they are easier to scale than traditional web servers. Disadvantages are possible slow startup times and high latency, thanks to the fact that users need to connect to the data center or server that the function was deployed to. And this can be in the worst cases on the other side of the world. So what are then edge functions? Well, in short, they are serverless functions with just a couple of differences. The number one difference is the location that the function is deployed to. As we learned about serverless functions, they are deployed to a single data center or server, and whenever someone wants to execute the function, they need to connect to that single data center. With edge functions, this is different. Edge functions are not deployed just to one server, but they are deployed to multiple servers that are geographically located around the world. This is also where the name edge comes from, because the functions are deployed to the edges of the internet. So when a client wants to execute the function, it doesn't have to connect to a server on the other side of the world, but instead it will be routed to the nearest server that the function is deployed to. This reduces the geographical distance that the request needs to travel, and that way also decreases the latency. Another difference is that edge functions use a different runtime than serverless functions. Serverless functions can use multiple runtimes depending on the service provider, but at least Vercel edge functions use the Google's V8 JavaScript and WebAssembly engine. And this means that there is a limited set of APIs inside of edge functions that you can use. So in conclusion, when we are talking about edge functions, we are basically talking about serverless functions that live on the edge. In order to have our functions on the edge, we need to have this edge network and infrastructure in place. And this is something that the service providers like Vercel or Netlify provide. At this point, I want to thank DataCMS for sponsoring this week's video. DataCMS is very user and developer friendly headless CMS. It pairs super well with NextJS, and it's easy to use their GraphQL API, fetch content from the CMS to your NextJS application. DataCMS also has a worldwide CDN, which means that your content, images, and videos all live on the edge. And as we just learned about the edge architecture, having your content on the edge means low latency and that your users will get their content super fast. I highly recommend that you check and try out DataCMS. I have a couple of videos that will get you started with NextJS and DataCMS, so I'll be sure to leave a link to those down in the description. Thank you again, DataCMS.
Actually, I'm very tired. I think I'm gonna stop here. I'm probably, yeah, not sure if I'm gonna... I thought I would be more rested, but I think I did a lot of things, so I need a break, and I'll probably watch and study all of the stuff on NextJS and Django. I think I'm gonna do these ones without studying, and just so I don't get too distracted. I'm gonna do them today, and then I'm gonna study more NextJS, do NextJS, and then study the other ones, do the other ones before I stream, and then maybe I'll go back to Django, and then I'll think about it whether or not I'll stream the process of studying the stuff for the Django task. And after that, I'm gonna continue to work on manipulating the data. But I'm probably gonna do all of this off stream, so I'll probably come back 2 days from now or something like that to continue to work on the blockchain stuff. So see you then.